Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar covering the topic of community integration serving the needs of the reentry population. I'm your host, Jay Dong from BCT Partners. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the ongoing support from HUD's Office of Innovation that made this webinar series possible, and also our colleagues at First Pick who has done a fantastic job promoting the series and helping us all stay connected. Lastly, I'd like to thank you for taking time away from your busy schedule to participate in today's webinar. Next, I'd like to go over some housekeeping items. During today's session, we'll ask you to use the chat box at the bottom right corner of the screen to input your questions, comments, and feedback throughout the presentation and during the Q&A session at the end. If you experience any technical difficulties, please send me a message so that I can help you troubleshoot the issue. Now, I would like to introduce you to our esteemed panelist, Veronica Vargas, the principal of VV Consulting, LLC, and a senior fellow for Case Commons. She's a focused leader with over 25 years of experience developing and executing crime prevention and intervention, reentry, and therapeutic programming. Ms. Vargas has led work for national and international delegations, foundations, agencies, and individuals, as well as in domestic and international settings, including work with USAID, which is short for United States Agency for International Development. Veronica currently consults for the Annie Casey Foundation's Juvenile Justice Strategy Group, working directly with juvenile court judges and probation departments to encourage investments in effective community intervention as an alternative to state correctional confinement. Prior to her work as a consultant, she served as an executive for the world's largest gang intervention, reentry, and rehab organization, Homeboy Industries. While at Homeboy Industries, she served in multiple capacities over the years, including in development as COO and Director of External Affairs. She provided direction to the founder and executive team on issues critical to the organization's growth, including research, trends, and public advocacy. She also functions as the liaison to state and city government, the community, and participated on numerous advisory boards and initiatives to provide guidance on gang intervention, reentry, and the organization's comprehensive therapeutic model of crime and violence prevention. Veronica's passion and dedication have led her to a lifelong career of serving, addressing, and enriching the lives of disconnected youth, marginalized communities, and underrepresented populations. Without further ado, I now turn it over to Veronica Vargas to kick off the presentation. Veronica?
Thank you, Jay, and thank you, everybody, for taking the time to sit in on this webinar. This topic is very near and dear to my heart, so I do appreciate your time. Today's agenda includes data demonstrating the societal and economic impact that mass incarceration has on our communities and nation. I also plan to present reentry through the lens of the EnVision Center's 4 strategic pillars, which are economic empowerment, educational attainment, health and wellness, character, and leadership. And then in the end, we'll have some time for Q&A and next steps. Today's goals are to improve understanding of reentry, as I like to call it, life onboarding, and to better understand what they're experiencing. To provide guidance on how to engage and increase participation in center programming, and to explore design of creative programming to successfully serve the reentry population. Societal impact. Let me share some staggering statistics on the societal impact mass incarceration has had on our communities and nation. If you look at the image to the left, the United States has the highest incarceration rates in the world. 1 in 3 adults have been arrested by age 23 and have criminal records. In 2018, over 1.4 million people were incarcerated in the United States, of which 110,845 were women. As it relates to racial disparities, more than 60% of the people in prison today are people of color. Black men are 6 times as likely to be incarcerated as white men, and Hispanic men are 2.7 times as likely. mass incarceration not only disproportionately affects communities of color, but also LGBTQ individuals and people with histories of abuse and mental illness. Now, if you look at the image to the right, we know criminal records present lifelong barriers to employment. But it's really not just employment, it's to housing, to public assistance, education, to building good credit, to family reunification. And really, frankly, it is the major driver to poverty. In fact, without mass incarceration, 5 million fewer Americans would not have struggled with poverty between 1980 and 2014. The U.S. poverty rate would have dropped by 20% without it. Economic impact. It is quite alarming. This graph shows correctional expenditures by state and federal governments. You can see here that over 55 billion taxpayer dollars were spent in 2012. The U.S. Department of Commerce estimated employment losses due to criminal records in as much as 65 billion gross domestic product output. So, I mean, think about that number and think of the loss of human capital. As you can see, once people have been held accountable for their actions, it really behooves all of us to help the reentry population secure employment so they can become contributing members of our society.
All right, so we'll have a live poll to prior to kicking off the next section of the presentation. As you can see, the questions on the slide here, we're asking to provide your input in the chat box. First question is, does your center currently serve members of the reentry population? And if you answer yes to that question, please share some examples of your current programs. If you answer no, please elaborate on the reasons why you do not currently serve members of the reentry population. We'll give the attendees about 3 to 5 minutes to put their answers in the chat box. And we do also have a comment from Dr. Michael Huff, and this is to Veronica. Thank you for your work with Homeboy Industries. I worked closely with your team while volunteering in Los Angeles at the LA Promise Zone and the South LA Promise Zone. Thank you, Dr. Huff. Okay, we have some answers coming in. Justin Walker is stating that not yet, but this is an area of focus for us nationally. Thank you, Justin. From Lynn, excuse me if I butcher your last name, Pinell, stating yes, we have peer recovery program. Great, thank you, Lynn. Shanita Wilson is stating that yes, we have financial workshops and classes. Great. And from Henry Och, yes, primary care, behavioral health, and SUD treatment. Keisha Williams is stating yes, Shelter Plus Care Program. Pamela Langford is stating yes, our programs are open to those in the reentry population, but have not been overly successful in engaging that population. We have scholarships available for using our makerspace and entrepreneur services. Thank you. Dr. Huff is stating yes, both Sacramento area EnVision centers have set up jobs centers which support reentry wraparound services. Suzanne Richards is stating in Fort Worth, we provide vocational skills, training, financial literacy, job readiness skills, rental and utility assistance, tuition assistance for certification and training programs. And from Dan Busian is saying, not directly, but many of our program participants have experience with the justice system bill. Okay, thank you guys for your input. Let's move forward to the next section of our presentation. Go ahead, Veronica.
Thank you, everybody. Dr. Huff, my heart is smiling right now, knowing that you have worked with Home Ministries. That's fantastic. And it sounds like I'm in great company of folks that are currently providing services to the reentry population. So this is fantastic, and hopefully we'll have an excellent and impactful conversation at the end. Understanding reentry as life onboarding, direction of life and opportunities. What are people experiencing? It's an avalanche of emotions and daunting obstacles. The visual I like to give is like drinking water out of a fire hydrant. People are trying to decipher what role they can or are expected to play within their family and community. Environment adaptation, what they expected versus what happened when they came home. Relationship repair or establishment. Some people might be mending or trying to reestablish relationships with immediate family, parents, siblings, children. They might be learning to trust again, trying to avoid negative or unsupportive relationships. Housing and food, they are experiencing extreme housing instability. Folks are living in halfway and transitional homes. Some might be couch surfing, or they may be back in unsupportive households. And food, access to regular healthy meals. I put that in there because not everyone has access to regular healthy meals or a kitchen. And I think that's important to highlight. Employment. People are struggling, they're stressed, they're frustrated trying to seek and obtain employment with a felony. The man of the house, self-imposed breadwinner expectations or pressure. Some folks might be experiencing child support garnishments. And that can, for some people, that can look like a $1.25 check. Parole and probation. Struggling to manage and coordinate mandated services or testing. Community supervision schedules might be interfering with employment or for future opportunities. Some folks might be trying to hide an ankle monitor. It's extremely challenging to secure employment when you are mandated to seek services or report to your parole or probation officer in the middle of the day or during random hours. From a legal standpoint, people are in need of child support payments or garnishment setup. They might be in custody battles, struggling with immigration issues, or in need of having their records expunged. Note that juveniles can usually get their records sealed 2 years after release, and adults, depending on their state, can get their records expunged. However, in some states, only misdemeanors are eligible for expungement, while in others, felonies can also be expunged, with the exception of very serious or violent crimes. What are some of the overall strategies on how to engage and serve the reentry population? Let's start with location and environment. It is important to create a non-judgmental environment. You want to make sure you have a friendly and welcoming reception desk. It's critical. Because if it isn't welcoming, they may not return. Assign a navigator or a credible messenger to hover at the front door and lobby. If possible, you might want to extend hours of operation during the week and weekends. Under leadership structure and staffing, this bullet point is probably the most important information that I can highlight, and that's the importance of hiring people with lived experience. I really can't stress this enough. It is transformational to hire people with lived experience. A navigator and a credible messenger is that one person who can welcome an individual and immediately connect and identify with the person's phase of their reentry process. I also like to remind leadership that it is critical not only to train people who are delivering services, but everybody in the building. Train and coach on the reentry challenges, engagement approaches, and provide culturally relevant programming. Services and partnerships. Create individually tailored plans and coordinate service delivery. Attempt to partner with organizations who currently and successfully serve the reentry community. And establish partnerships with academic institutions and community health departments. And we'll talk a little bit more about that under health and wellness. Recruitment and participation. Also under services and partnerships. You want to create individually tailored plans and coordinate the services within the EnVision Center. Under recruitment and participation, again, navigators and credible messengers are very effective at engaging. And if you can provide daycare and babysitting services, it's a huge plus, especially for women. Some people might be returning to their community for the first time after many years. So it's easy to become overwhelmed with family and relationship unification, with parenting, caretaking responsibilities, employment, housing, daycare, gang or neighborhood threats. So I'd like to recommend the following. Contemplate a person's length of custody and age, and be aware that an adult might have adolescent tendencies. Serve without judgment. They have already been held accountable for their actions. Listen first. It's about what they need and not what you want for them. Also, inquire if their social needs are being met. Do they have a place? Where are they living? Do they have food? Do they have access to transportation, gas, and electricity in their home? And do they feel safe? Gauge their skill set and work towards growth and empowerment, not shaming. It should be constructive criticism, not negative feedback. Also, assume that this is the first time they are being exposed to the information. And be aware that you might be the only supportive adult they know. To maximize results, coordinate and be flexible with your curriculum. The community is struggling a lot, and they are juggling a lot. So expect absences or tardiness. Some people might be taking 2 or 3 buses to get there. But what matters is that they continue to come back. So keep an open door policy. And if there's client interest, try to negotiate mandated parole probation classes or services to be taken at EnVision centers. It really is not. It's more. You can be more successful than you think. It doesn't hurt to ask, and sometimes parole and probation departments will appreciate the fact that you can offer the services there, and they can even maybe visit the person at the center as opposed to them trying to track them down or the person trying to take multiple buses to see their PO. And lastly, it's beneficial to provide employers with some prep and support. People want to help, but sometimes they're not sure how. A general overview of reentry challenges can really motivate employers to invest in someone's livelihood and skill set.
All right, let's pause here to give our attendees a couple of minutes to see if they have any questions regarding the overall strategies on how to engage and serve the reentry population. I'll flip back and forth between this slide and the previous one before we move forward with the presentation. Justin had a question regarding if the slides will be sent to attendees after today's session. Yes, we will send out a PDF copy of the slide deck as well as the accompanying fact sheet to all who are in attendance today. All right, let's move forward to the next slide.
Now, one of the most deflating aspects of job searching is, I call it that question. And here are 3 examples of how to coach people to respond to it. Jay, if you don't mind, do you mind helping me out with this slide here? I'll ask the question and you can answer it.
Sure, absolutely.
All right. So prepping clients on how to answer that question. So tell me, why were you in prison?
I was in a facility to be held accountable for an action that I regret. However, I'm eager for the opportunity for a fresh start and to prove that I'm worth investing in.
And what did you do that you in prison?
The reason is no longer relevant since I have been accountable for my actions. That was my past. I am now interested in successfully reintegrating back into my community so that I can be a contributing member.
Why would I hire a criminal?
I understand you may be concerned with public safety. However, all I can say is that I have been accountable for my actions, and now I understand how poor my decisions affected my family and my community.
Great, thank you, Jay. It's really valuable to invest the time into prepping clients on how to answer this question, because this is the question that catches people off guard. It infuriates them, it depresses them, and many just want to give up. So it's very important to, as you're doing mock interviews, to incorporate this question into the process. Next, we have economic empowerment. With 87% of employers conducting background checks, a criminal record can be a major barrier to employment. More than 60% of formerly incarcerated individuals are unemployed 1 year after being released. And those who did find jobs take home 40% less pay annually. Now, what to expect when job searching? Job searching, I think all of us would agree that it's a humbling process, right? But especially for the reentry population, they come out excited and ready to work, only to experience a steady flow of rejection. So it is very important to prep clients on anticipated emotions so they don't give up. And here are some examples. Excitement. People are ready for their first job or to get paid with clean money. They want to make themselves or the people they love proud. Fatigue. People are applying to 15 to 20 places, and no one's calling back. They're exhausted by the interview process. They're unmotivated and depressed. Disappointment. Disappointed it's taken so long to find a job. You're feeling judged by employers and you're just ready to give up. Here, I have keeping a job and leaving a job, right? And the bullet points here are basic soft skills that everybody gets to practice and learn about and gets taught, right, in a typical financial literacy course. But the goal here is to develop a toolkit and to teach healthy work habits. And when teaching soft skills, it's important to provide relevant scenarios and role play. In an earlier slide, you'll recall that I stated that those who do find jobs will take home 40% less pay annually. So it's really worth investing the time to coach on how to properly resign without damaging the relationship. Financial literacy really should be tailored with culturally appropriate examples. Be ready to listen and dispel banking mistrust and address the cons of cashing centers. For those who have never experienced employment, it is worth explaining state and federal taxes that will be taken from their paycheck. Budgeting and examining money habits. You want to provide tips on how to save and introduce the concept of investing. Credit, why it's important, and how to establish and maintain a good score. And also be ready to be aware that people get exploited for their good credit. So it would be incredibly valuable to provide examples on how this can happen to them. Legal and financial aspects of owning a car. Now, this is an area where folks get into trouble because they dismiss the importance of registration, insurance, and driving with a license. So don't assume they know the consequences, and feel comfortable to educate about typical violations and legal issues, both for non-driving and tickets while driving. Non-driving, non-current registration, parking tickets, tickets while driving, driving without a license, failure to signal, seatbelt violations, child seat violations, no insurance, leaving the scene of an accident.
I think let's pause here to see if any attendees have any questions or comments before we advance to the next section of the presentation. Okay, let's move on.
Educational attainment. Your approach should be to empower and not overwhelm. Not overwhelm. The RAND Corporation states that less than 15% of incarcerated people in state prisons have completed at least some post-secondary education.
I'm sorry, Veronica, we have a question from Suzanne Richards. What types of organization provide training on, I think this says, financial aspect of owning a car?
What organizations do?
Right.
I don't know if there's a specific organization. I think I would go to the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles of your state, to read their your state's data to see what are some of the typical violations that occur, so that you make sure that you incorporate that into the curriculum. And it's so common. I can't even tell you how often people are driving. They buy a car and then realize, oh, I don't have a driver's license, and of course, and that's an avalanche of not only financial challenges but also puts them at risk of rearrest. But I would start with your DMV. I don't think there's a specific organization that I can think of that strictly focuses on that.
Thank you, Suzanne. There's another question from Gerald Thomas. Can you share how engaging with ex-offender friendly employers can decrease the wage gap?
That's a great question. I think especially if the employer, if there are employers that are business owners and they have flexibility in salary, so they are able to provide somebody with a living wage, as opposed to maybe like a fast food restaurant, right, where it's kind of a cookie cutter and everybody makes the same amount of money. But if you work with employers, and people want to help, they understand the economic impact and they want to assist. And so really just working with them to teach them on what are the expectations. Now, you don't have to disclose the person's information, but you can just give a general overview of what are some of the challenges, and how him or her can be helpful, and how his business or her business can really provide somebody with that opportunity. And if the employer has a great experience, they will continue to rehire. But if you don't prep and if they have a bad experience, then at least they have you to go to and ask questions and say, hey, listen, I'm struggling with this person. Can you help me out here? And then you're working with the client, and you're also educating the employer on some of the barriers and things to look out for, so they can make this relationship and opportunity work.
Thank you. Let's let's move forward with our presentation.
Here are some additional opportunities under educational attainment and some of my suggested topics. Digital literacy is critical to assist not only with work readiness, but time management and financial literacy. I highly encourage EnVision centers to be creative with curriculum titles. For example, name a class general tutoring as opposed to learning to read. Also in an earlier slide, I suggested flexibility with curriculum to maximize results. What does that mean? Well, if someone is learning to read, maybe they can simultaneously be studying for the driver's test. Also, I recommend incorporating civics education and duty because many folks don't know their voting rights or understand the importance and purpose of census data. And then lastly, available resources. So don't forget to ask and look into some of the available resources that can help cover educational expenses. And here are some examples. The Department of Children and Protective Services, probation and parole departments, general relief or general assistance, and military if the person has served.
All right, let's pause here again to see if any of our attendees have any questions or comments before we move on to the next section that focuses on health and wellness. Okay, let's move on.
Health and wellness. Barriers to public assistance really hurt women and children. In many states, people with felony drug convictions are banned for life from receiving certain types of assistance. That translates to about 180,000 women who are subject to a lifetime ban of temporary assistance for needy families, what we call TANF. The second image highlights the number of people in prisons and jails for drug offenses in 1980 and 2018. As you can see, there's a glaring and alarming increase of individuals incarcerated for nonviolent offenses. This is a result of harsh sentencing laws and mandatory minimums that are keeping people in prison for longer periods of time. Healthcare. There is significant mistrust in the healthcare system. So you'll want to contemplate a person's personal experience in order to successfully inculcate appropriate healthcare habits. Also, really spend time breaking down the purpose of preventative medicine and the importance of seeking care from one primary care physician as opposed to jumping around from clinic to clinic or seeking care in the emergency room. And part of the healthcare habits, right? These are basic to many, but completely foreign to the reentry population. There's also fear. And also know that the mistrust is strictly from, historical experimentation on communities of colors, but also misdiagnosis and over-medication since they were children. They've been diagnosed and over-medicated their entire lives, and so the last thing they want to do is to continue to seek care from health care that they do not trust. A little bit of assistance with healthcare navigation. I mean, heck, most of us need navigation help, right? What's available out there, the Affordable Care Act, Medicaid, an employer, or just independent healthcare. Specialized curriculum. This here is, this depends on the population that you're serving, but I'll highlight on the ones that I think are the most effective and valuable to implement. Healthy eating, disease prevention, and physical activity, right? you can partner up with a nonprofit or a faith-based community to help put together some seminars and workshops on healthy eating. And, there's a lot of trust within the faith-based communities. Trauma-informed care, you might want to establish some relationships with some academic institutions or some community health departments to provide trauma-informed care, which for this population, it should always include cognitive behavioral therapy, cognitive processing therapy, and insight therapy. Child development. This is learning to connect and play with your child in a nonviolent manner. Learning how to be a parent or a father, right? You don't know how to be one if you've never had one. Adolescent brain development, learning that your brain does not stop developing until the age of 26. And support groups, substance abuse, domestic violence, also called intimate partner violence, and Alcoholics Anonymous.
All right, let's pause here to see if attendees have any questions and comments. We have actually have a question that pertains to the previous section. Jabril Thomas is asking, what are your thoughts on short-term credentials that lead to family-sustaining wages for reentry population?
Short-term credentials. I think if it works, then just import them, right? People don't have the luxury to. Some people don't have the luxury to go back to school, depending on their responsibilities. So if they can sign up for short-term credentials, that will guarantee employment, right? For example, I think there's a lot of time people will offer credentialing programs, let's say billing, medical billing, and that in your state might be an industry that absolutely does not hire somebody with a record. So you just want to be careful that the credentialing, that the services that they're or the area that they're hoping to work in accepts folks with a potential criminal record.
Thank you for that answer, Veronica. Let's see if any other attendees have any questions pertaining to the this current section here on health and wellness. Okay, let's go ahead and advance to the next section.
Okay. The last pillar focuses on character and leadership. You cannot build character and leadership until life skills are discussed, processed, and a person is on the path towards healing and recovery. Now, we all strive, right, to characteristics we strive for are to be empathetic and compassionate and patient and wise and sincere and flexible and trustworthy and accountable, all of those. But really, first you have to focus on interpersonal growth and healing. And this is where EnVision centers really have an opportunity to create transformative life skills, support groups, and group sessions. And these sessions are not meant to offer these sessions are meant to offer personal development, to guide people to discover and claim their purpose or mission. It's not a therapy session per se, but it's an opportunity to establish a foundation and set achievable goals and help people and help them align their intentions through pro-social choices that will serve their mission and their community.
Here we have another live poll Want to find out if your center currently offers support groups to members of the reentry population. If you answer yes, please share some examples of the topics covered in the support group. Veronica, I think in the interest of time, we should go ahead and advance to the next slide. And while the answers come in, I'll call them out to you.
Sure. Here's a list of a sample of some life skills topics. Examining addiction to neighborhood street culture as a lifestyle. Coping with daily high-risk situations that might trigger relapse. Understanding and identifying current behaviors that lead to a drug use. With whom am I choosing to hang out and where am I hanging out? Healthy versus unhealthy relationships. Masculinity and fatherhood. Emotional self-care. People are learning to heal. They need to address guilt, shame, and abandonment issues, or they're just learning to understand their emotions. Grief and loss. And preparing for post-parole. What does that mean? Prepping people for, what does it look like not to be under supervision? And how do you show up when nobody's watching? Or understanding their situational awareness. Now, these are very valuable life skills topics that if you do not, that really must be addressed if you are working with the reentry population. It's obviously very important to provide financial literacy skills, but if these life topics are not addressed, then it's a lost opportunity for the reentry population and for the community and for the EnVision centers, really. And lastly, if done correctly, what are the expected outcomes? And they are quite simple: a decline in recidivism, an engaged and healed contributing member of society. And it's so magnificent to see positive outcomes, because we don't get to see them often unless you work with the population, because everything we read in the paper or in social media or it's on TV, everything is negative. And so please know that the outcomes are extremely positive.
Thank you, Veronica. We have some comments and answers to the poll question on the previous slide here. Lynn Pennell is stating that parenting classes have been offered. Suzanne Richards is saying, yes, before COVID, we offered sessions where we brought together 6 to 8 social services providers, and they would each get 5 minutes to present about their services and programs. Then we'd allow time for the ex-offenders to meet one-on-one with the organizations, similar to a mini fair on a monthly basis. Thank you, Suzanne. And Justin Walker is stating, not yet, but understand the availability of those support groups are an important part of any program. Thank you, Justin. Let's pause here briefly to see if there are any other questions concerning the life skills sample topics presented here. Suzanne has a follow-up question. What is the preferred way to refer to an ex-offender, i.e. returning citizens, individuals who are re-entering, and other terms?
It depends. Like, I know the East Coast likes to use the words returning citizens. That's where I first heard it. It's really, I don't think, I think returning citizens might not be terribly clear to everybody that it is a reentry population. So I think it's a little bit of a lost opportunity because if we're not true with our glaring statistics that 1 in 3 people have records or by the age of 23, then I think it's a disservice to the community that we are trying to promote to successful reentry back into the community. But it's preference. There is no wrong or right wording between the two.
We have an earlier comment from Jennifer Oliver stating that, yes, they do currently serve the homeless population. Their team currently works with the individuals to assist with obtaining employment and secured housing. Also, they work with the Goodwill's reentry program. Thank you, Jennifer. All right, in the interest of time, let's go ahead and advance to the next section before we conclude the presentation and carve out some time for Q&A.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a lot of you are providing some type of programming listed here, and that's fantastic. And for those of you who might be interested in learning more about some national practice models or some gold standards, these are, here's a list here of national organizations and experts that successfully serve high-risk youth, gang-involved, and formerly incarcerated populations. Some offer a combination of programming and social enterprises, and most of them offer training academies. We have BAM, Youth Guidance, Becoming a Man, mostly focuses on school-age youth and offers a training academy. We have Community Connections for Youth in Harlem, and they offer credible messenger training and technical assistance. And I believe they have a social enterprise that sells salsas. Homeboy Industries provides wraparound services and has a multitude of social enterprises. Here are, a few. I think they have 7 total: a cafe, bakery, electronics, recycling. We have Insight Circle, which is multi-state, and they provide healing circles to system-impacted people. And they too offer facilitation training. We have ROCA, that is located in Massachusetts and Maryland. They provide intervention, a program for young mothers, and a culinary arts program. They also are one of the few organizations, actually one of the first organizations, I'm going to say, in the United States that was granted a social impact bond, I think with Goldman Sachs. So if you're interested about learning more about social impact bonds, they would be the organization to reach out to. And then lastly, this is also a multi-state program. It's called the Mankind Project, and it's a network of men with lived and non-lived experience that provide support groups.
Great, thank you, Veronica. Dr. Huff is suggesting also ARC is an excellent practice model as well.
Yes, ARC is the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. I agree, Dr. Huff.
Thank you. I think we have about 7 minutes left to conduct our Q&A session. So at this time, please feel free to put your questions in the chat box, and we will read them out loud and ask Veronica to provide her comments and answers to your questions. We have a comment from Bill Tolbert. Individual transformation in orientation and skill building should start pre-reentry. So EnVision centers are reinforcing good habits in orientation rather than establish them from scratch. Thank you, Bill. How can we contact Veronica? Veronica, if you're open to sharing your contact information, I will list your email address in the follow-up email I'll send out following the conclusion of the webinar.
Absolutely. I'm happy to help.
Hey, Veronica, for my own curiosity, could you just expand and elaborate a little bit more about the idea of social enterprises and how that is instrumental in the success of connecting reentry population to their employment needs?
Yeah, absolutely. Social enterprises, they're a business that use earned revenue to directly fund an organization's programs and services. They can also produce products and provide employment opportunities to people being served. And so if you can start a social enterprise within an EnVision center, that would be fabulous. Or you might want to reach out to nonprofit organizations that offer that have social enterprises. So as you're teaching financial literacy, they can be adapting their soft skills within a business that focuses on serving the community. But it's also wonderful. You want to diversify your funding budget. You don't want to be you want your pie to have a little bit of government, a little bit of private donations, and then having a social enterprise, right? It also will help with your bottom line, and it has less restrictions, right? Because as you know, specific grants, they have very rigid guidelines, and so if you have social enterprises, it gives you a little bit more flexibility to make changes on your service delivery.
Right. So you were saying that will lead to unrestricted income being increased.
Exactly. Yeah. So nothing, you don't have any unrestricted line items as it relates to any type of revenue that's being generated through your social enterprise.
Excellent. Thank you.
And it's helpful because, as you know, for example, if you want to train your clients, normally that's not a line item in anybody's budget nowadays. Or if you want to, you provide services half of the day, and then the latter half, a person is learning to work, and not learning to work, but working and receiving a paycheck. And for some, it might be the first time that I call it clean money. There's a handful of organizations throughout the country. I think most states have social enterprises. If you reach out to me with a specific state in mind, hopefully I can guide you to a nonprofit that has one.
Thank you very much. We have 2 minutes left until we hit 3 o'clock. Let's see if there's any last minute questions or comments from any of our attendees. Well, I want to thank you all for participating in today's webinar. We'll send out a follow-up email that contains a PDF copy of the slide deck and fact sheet for today's presentation. Additionally, the email will capture some of the questions posed and answers provided during the live delivery. We encourage you to reply to the email message if you need further clarification on what was covered today and have additional questions or comments. Thank you again, and this will conclude today's webinar session. We look forward to seeing you all at the next session where we'll cover the topic of program sustainability. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.